Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I am Tamara Johnson Shealey. Good morning. It's Friday morning. It's beautiful here in the sunny state of Georgia. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. We have a special broadcast this morning. I am very excited, but let's start out with my trusty co-host. Let's see where he is, Mr. David Slavin. Let's see. There he is.
Here I am.
Good morning, David.
Good morning, Tamara.
How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Awesome.
It's been a terrible week, but I'm doing good, and I think that there has been some real humanity that has been expressed in the face of some real inhumanity. So that's it's both things at the same time.
Yep. And we're gonna dive right into it. But Ken is in the house. Let's see where he is. Ken Williams, who joins us every second Saturday of the month. Good morning, Ken.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for
having me.
You?
Awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome. Ken, tell everybody again your website and that title, because I tend to butcher it, but I'm gonna get it right.
Understood. It's kwillservices.com, KWILL services.com. And I'm a use of force expert witness. I've been certified by federal court to look at police practices, use of force, excessive force cases, usually wrongful death cases as well. I offer an expert opinion that's unbiased and neutral, looking at both sides of usually civil court actions or administrative actions that involve police and citizens with respect to contacts that end, unfortunately, with death.
Yeah. Well, this morning, Ken, on our broadcast, we have Miss Susan Bro. Let's see, let's bring her in. Good morning, Susan.
How are all of you?
Good morning. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you so much.
I have followed your story. For those of you who don't know, Miss Susan Bro is the mother of Heather Heyer, and she was killed in Charlottesville was that 2017?
Yes,
Bro?
ma'am.
2017. Thank you for joining us on this broadcast.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
Yes. David?
Yeah, it's almost 2 years, right, Susan?
Right.
3 more days, and we are with you. We want to give you every bit of support. I know it's a tough time. These anniversaries are really, really painful. So we're really, really honored to have you on with us. So thank you. Thank you for what you've been doing over these years now, committing yourself to the struggle for that as well.
Thank you so much.
Ken?
And as always, condolences to you, your family. A tragic event. And as a retired former member, law enforcement, these type of things should not be happening in America. But unfortunately, my condolences to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So David, I want you to kind of help lead this conversation, and let's go there. This country we're in some strange times. I'm not old enough to know. I just know the history that I know, but we're not in the best of times in this country as it relates to race, racism, and race relations, David.
Well, I tend to look at it as possibly an inflection point. That things have people who were able to be complacent and kind of sit on the sidelines are that is European Americans who thought they had the privilege to remove themselves from the ugliness in this society that has deep historical roots, are now realizing that they can't do that, and that I think is the possibility is here for some real change. But we folks out there have got to be insistent that this is not something that you can simply do halfway. I think that's something that Susan would agree with me, but I don't.
Absolutely. Yes.
And we've just had two incidents, very possibly the Dayton, but certainly the El Paso incident, that have been a consequence clearly of the president's rhetoric. And we also, at the same time, lost somebody this week, Toni Morrison, who is one of the who has been one of the great voices of insight into what white supremacy is about. So I thought that one of the things that I might do is to read a quote from her about race, if you don't mind. This was I just looked this up before we came on the air, so it's not like I'm some kind of Toni Morrison scholar, anything like that. But I thought she's one of the greatest writers we've ever produced in this country, and her insights are certainly there. So one of the things that she said, this was about 3 years ago in the New Yorker, she wrote an essay. She said, personal debasement is not easy for white people, especially for white men, but to retain the conviction of their superiority to others, especially to black people, they are willing to risk contempt and to be reviled by the mature, the sophisticated, and the strong. If it weren't so ignorant and pitiful, one could mourn this collapse of dignity in the service of an evil cause. So what she's saying there, the comfort of being naturally better, of not having a struggle or demand civil treatment, is hard to give up. The confidence that you will not be watched in a department store, that you are preferred customer in a high-end restaurants. These social inflections belong to whiteness and are greedily relished. So scary are the consequences of the collapse of white privilege that many white Americans have flocked to a political platform that supports and translates violence against the defenseless as strength. Violence against the defenseless as strength. These people are not so much angry as terrified, with the kind of terror that makes the knees tremble. And then another point, people make money off racism, pro and con. I think that's a very interesting insight to say, pro and con. Racism protects people from a certain kind of pain. If you take away racism from certain people, I mean the vitriolic racists as well as the sort of social racists, really interesting terminology here, they might have to face something really terrible: misery, self-misery, and deep pain about who they are. It's just easier to say that one over there is the cause of all my problems.
Susan?
Well, it's interesting because I definitely agree with what she said, but I would like to add that I was discussing this problem of white extremism with author Adrian Brooks just the other day. And Adrian pointed out that a lot of times the extremists are indeed full of self-loathing for their own identities. The young man who murdered my daughter apparently is half Jewish. Hitler was part Jewish. It would be interesting to see how often a form of self-loathing has turned into an extreme reaction, a radicalized notion that makes people feel they have the right to take others' lives.
Yeah, and I also think that there's that what Toni Morrison is saying is not an excuse,
Oh no, not at all.
And, she's but I think that what she is doing is she's including the rest of us, European Americans, in the responsibility for this. This is not, we can't separate ourselves from the white supremacists like Richard Spencer or Kessler, the guy from UVA, and indeed Alex Fields. We have to both, accept responsibility, accept the fact that this is part of that our silence is collusion, and that there's only one way to end it is to speak out and to stand in solidarity with people of color and to expose this stuff for what it is. I think that this whole idea that violence against the defenseless is considered strength is something that we really need to confront, and it's right there at the top. The racist in chief is right there. He is obviously somebody who is filled with self-loathing. It's just a joke that I heard that he should go back where he came from, which is Queens, New York.
Well, and he's only second generation of American anyway.
Yeah.
I think in addition to violence, which definitely affects many, we have to look at the institutions of racism that are built into our society structure, our systems of housing, our systems of economic opportunity, educational disparity. Those institutions have definitely benefited white people for a long time. And they have a much larger impact even than the violence because they hit everyone. Now, definitely people rise above that. People work hard. They avail themselves of opportunities. But I watch, Alfred Wilson is my co-founder, and he's Black. And I watch his children are half Black and half Palestinian. And I have to watch how hard he has to push and advocate for them. They don't get to take any time off. They don't get to just get by. Their class president, their football star, their high grade scholar. One of the daughters just was inducted into the Cheerleader Hall of Fame. They have worked really hard to excel constantly, and they don't get to slide by like a lot of kids. We were having a conversation one day about our kids as little kids, and he was talking about how his wife worked really hard to make sure the kids knew their ABCs, their colors, their shapes, that they knew how to read before they started school. And I said something about, the Montessori system often waits until the kids are 9 or so to take up reading. And he said, as Black and Palestinian, we couldn't afford that wait. We had to always be ahead of the game. And I had never thought about that. That is a definite impact on a constant level. Violence is definitely a problem, but we also have to look at the systemic problems.
Yeah. And in some ways that those systemic problems are a form of violence.
They are. They're definitely a form of oppression, and they benefit the white population.
May I state that, I'm very, very pleased to be on this panel today with you, Susan. And clearly, we always say apples don't fall far from trees. So your daughter being a hero, a champion of equality through your beliefs, resonates clearly with you representing your family. And I'm honored to be here, able to go and speak to you about this. I think it's important, and it's very, very important for us to get to within your household on that day in August. And, you and your daughter most likely had a discussion with each other about what she planned on doing sometime that day. You didn't?
No, first off, she's 32. She didn't live at home. She hadn't lived at home for 6 years.
No phone calls, though?
Nope. We saw each other twice a month.
Mm-hmm.
I had parents and in-laws who were from a different generation, and they were constantly needing to know what I was doing, where I was going. partly I'm an only child too. But so I vowed that when I had adult children, I'd stay out of their business, and I do still with my other child and my stepchildren. They can talk to me if they want to tell me something, but I don't bug them.
And
So
that's even more impressive, because your seed that you planted in your daughter, for her to have the courage within herself to say, you know what, there's a political event that's taking place that I'm going to be at because I want to represent a voice. I want to go and have freedom of expression. I want to be able to assemble with other people, and I want to do so without having to raise a fist or anything like that. I just want to elevate my voice. And she did that. And I'm reading from an indictment from the Department of Justice from Charlottesville in Virginia, where they secured 4 guilty pleas from people who came from California on August 12th, August
right.
11th, and they pled guilty to inciting riots and creating mayhem on that day. And were you in the courtroom when these people were pleading guilty?
No, they didn't have anything to do with my case. You have to understand that my life is extremely busy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually talking to you from a hotel out of state because I'm on the midst of a travel trip,
Sure.
which I will take time off of tomorrow and half a day on Sunday and all day on Monday to be with family.
So are you aware of any of the facts that the government laid out in the case?
I read it. I read it in some news article. I don't know. I read a lot.
So Susan,
yes,
can I ask a question on when you're out on your
Sure.
speaking engagements? What are you telling Heather's story? Like, what are you actually what are you presenting with this trip that you're on today?
Well, I actually spoke yesterday at the
Mm-hmm.
event and stopped halfway back home.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the crowd. It depends on, do they already know the story? Do they not know the story? So with minor variations, I will tell the story to some extent. But then I talk about why Heather was important and why she was not important. Her role is vastly overplayed in August 12th. Literally, all she did that day was show up to walk with people. And while that was courageous and I was proud of her, that's really all she did. She didn't organize anything. She was not a well-known activist in the community, except among her friends and close associates. On Facebook and on Twitter, she was very passionate and took on a lot of people with difficult conversations, et cetera, et cetera. But on the day that she marched, the only people who probably knew her were people who had either been her paralegal customers at the bankruptcy firm where she worked, or people who she had been their bartender or waitress, and her friends. So, I talk about that. And then I talk
Susan,
about...
before you go into the next part of it, don't you know how important showing up is?
Well, that's what I'm going to say.
Yes.
So then I say, from there, I say, so that means you too have the ability to affect change, and you're not responsible for the outcome of that change. You don't know what that result will be. You have no idea, but you are responsible to show up. We call that step up and then step out.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just show up with good intentions, but actually show up to participate. And I find that very important. Yes.
Can I add 2 facts just to go and solidify what I mean by your daughter as a hero, as well as all the other participants that were there that day, in my eyes? On August 11th, according to the Department of Justice and its facts, it states that on the evening prior to the scheduled Unite the Right rally, several members of the RAM organization, RAM standing for Rise Above Movement, who came there from California, joined hundreds of individuals in a torch-lit march on the grounds of the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. And throughout that march, the participants chanted "Blood and soil," and "Jews will not replace us." Your daughter, the day before she joined other individuals on August 12th, she had to probably see the same news reports that millions of us saw the night before, with people with teepee torches walking through that university, but yet and still that next day she went out there.
Let me tell you, she didn't watch it on the news. She watched it on her friend Courtney's live stream Facebook. Courtney was
even
there.
more impressive.
Courtney was there. Courtney was yelling back at them, "We will replace you," along with several others. Courtney was not one of the ones attacked because she was along the edges, but Courtney's black.
Mm-hmm.
She's actually mixed, which would probably aggravate them even more. She's an absolutely beautiful young lady inside and out. Terrifies me that she goes out and does this on a regular basis when in the past. I think she's kind of calmed down now as far as where she goes, but she's still passionate in her activism. Regardless, Heather saw actual video of her friend there, and she was watching it with her best friend Justin, who is gay, and they were kind of like the couple from Will and Grace, Karen and Jack. That was kind of their relationship, and they had decided not to go previously because they thought it might be dangerous. And when she watched that video of Courtney's, she said, "I have to go." And he said, "Don't go. You know it's dangerous." And she said, "I know, I might die, but I got to go." Now, she didn't really think she was going to die. I don't know.
That's
Maybe
impressive.
She did.
That's
Maybe
impressive.
She did. Honestly, Courtney felt really guilty about it for a long time. And I said, "Baby girl, I know she had to go. Don't ever blame yourself." Courtney didn't cause violence to come to our town. Violence was brought to the town from within and without. It wasn't all outsiders.
Let me read another fact real quick. During and in the furtherance of this riot on August 11th, that evening at the university, RAM members struck multiple individuals with torches. As part of their plea, the defendants admitted these actions were not in self-defense.
Yes.
So your daughter had, through a friend, some knowledge that things weren't quite right that evening at that university in Charlottesville, but yet she still took it upon herself the next day, courageously the next day, just along with all these other people who assembled peacefully to denounce hate and racism in America. On August 12th, let me read one more fact. On the morning of August 12th, 2007, members of RAM, with hands wrapped in white athletic tape, were part of a large group of over 40 individuals seeking entry into Emancipation Park by way of 2nd Street when they were told by law enforcement officers to enter a different way. Now, as a former member of law enforcement, I'm shocked and I'm dismayed that the police would see individuals with their hands wrapped in tape and allow them to pass thinking that they were going to be peaceful protesters. What are your thoughts on that?
Are you aware of the previous visit of the KKK? That they had visited a number of times over that summer. That's why it's called the Summer of Hate. Mm-hmm. The previous time, they had been extremely protected by the police, and it ended up with tear gas actually being shot at the counter protesters who were there to say, "Get the KKK the heck out of here." Isn't
that a conversation in America that we should be having, where your daughter, other people peacefully assembling, they don't have their hands wrapped in tape, they're not carrying small firearms, long rifles, they're out there using their voices to amplify the fact that they don't want, or they denouncing hate peacefully, but yet and still other members of society are showing up armed, ready to fight, ready to riot, trying to incite riot, and police officers aren't doing their jobs. Isn't that part of the conversation we have to have?
Can I ask a question to jump in there with that same question? Can you explain what the tape means? I don't know why their hands are wrapped in tape. What's
knuckles for fighting?
Athletic tape wrapped around your knuckles.
Oh, okay.
Think about a prize fighter going into the ring to put on the boxing gloves. They wrap up their knuckles to make sure that their knuckles don't get broken and stuff like that.
Okay.
Carrying shields, carrying bats,
But this should be a conversation that we have to have between police and community that says, wait a minute, as a law enforcement officer that is trained to detect the potential of reasonableness of a crime that's about to take place, if you have people walking up with shields, bats, knuckles wrapped in electrical tape, carrying long rifles, guns, and another group on the other side is not carrying anything.
No, wait a minute. Those two groups never came together. The peaceful protesters stayed far away from the parks. They marched on the other side of the downtown mall, not where the violence was. There were other peoples who were started out. From what I've seen of the videos, and I actually have some friends who were there. Was the clergy with Reverend Barber, but the local clergy collective members in full church garb, so they were easily recognizable as clergy, led the march arm in arm down to the park to pray and to also say, don't come, please just go home, turn around, get out of here. And they were attacked, and there were local activists who were there to defend them. The local Antifa defended them. Now, I'm still trying to figure out my feelings about Antifa, but I do know Antifa in Charlottesville that day protected the counter protesters who were there. They were attacked by various members who came to Charlottesville to cause problems. And that's what some of those 4 cases were about, is that, but they were not in contact with the peaceful marchers that Heather was part of. They were
the cases
separate.
the cases I'm talking about, these people are the white supremists. The organization Rise Above RAM is a white supremacist organization.
Yes, I know. What I'm saying is that Antifa protected a lot of counter protesters who were up by the park. Their conflict was with the people from RAM and those others who came marching into the park. But Heather and the people she was with were not in contact with the violent white supremacists.
Yes. Can I follow up with one more question?
Sure.
So this is I guess this is what I'm asking then. If this is something that is not the first time that this event is taking place, so people have hindsight, in law enforcement, why would law enforcement allow something to assemble that has had past events that were violent? And why exactly locally? I'm assuming that someone has to probably pull a permit, possibly, to have these type of events. Yeah. Why would they not deny that?
You're asking the right questions. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Susan. Go ahead.
That day was a shit show, and you can tell that if you watch the videos. There's no way to politely put that. The Tim Heaphy report explains some of the problems with the police departments and the state police and officials, and part of the police reaction appears to perhaps have been due to how upset the public was with them after they tear gassed the crowd previously. So the choice was made to take a soft approach, which meant a non-approach to protecting the citizens that day. To say the least, mistakes were made all around. But that is fairly well documented in the Tim Heaphy report.
And the National Guard was called in, correct?
No.
That's
not unless it was at the end after everything was over. They were not there before that.
I didn't mention this to you, but my PhD is from the University of Virginia, And I spent, many years living in Charlottesville. So to me, this is very, very personal. I mean, I know all of these places, from living there for almost 7 years. More.
Did you live there as a poor person or a person of means?
I lived there kind of marginally. I mean, I was a graduate student, and for everything that means, which is both the possibilities of having a future that did not work out the way that it was supposed to. I became an adjunct faculty, but also I was connected with the working class people in the town through other means. I mean, that's just my background.
Right. Some people do. Some people only come in as a person of wealth and privilege
Right.
to the university and never really know what's going on in town.
Right. But anyway, there's something we should clarify, which is that this group of ministers, the events of August 11th and 12th, 2017, took place on Sunday and Monday, Ken. Mm-hmm. So that Sunday evening, the 11th, is right. When there was a counter protest by this large group of ministers. And when they came out, they really were in fear for their lives. So these young men who were out there, the white supremacists, organized white supremacists, they were very threatening to this group of ministers that came out of their church meeting. And
not quite. No. You've got your dates wrong. I'm sorry to correct you.
Okay.
But it was Friday the 11th and Saturday the 12th.
Oh,
now,
okay.
When the Tiki Torch March happened, on the edge of campus is the synagogue, and they were having services. And the ministers were gathered in another place having services, and I believe in both cases they were threatened to not allowed to come out of their respective services by the Tiki Torch marchers. I'm not sure exactly which source you would get that from. I've heard it from the people who were in those buildings and couldn't get out.
Can I read it? Can I read it from
please.
The facts that are outlined in the DOJ report? It says, violence erupted among the crowd with some punching, kicking, spraying chemical irritants, and swinging torches on August 11th, 2017 at this rally or riot situation. So again, right. I'm saying as a law enforcement professional, all right, how is it that law enforcement could have insight that these people, they're not out there to assemble peacefully. They're now out there to voice their First Amendment rights. I mean, they can have, really poor speech denouncing all types of hateful rhetoric, and that's not going to harm somebody. But once someone starts to take physical possession of weapons, someone starts going and wrapping up at their knuckles, people are swinging these torches as weapons, they're spraying chemical irritants on people the night before. I'm asking, as a culture in the Charlottesville area, what happened to law enforcement the next day to say, wait a minute, the night before, we know what happened. Why are we not out there in full force, a presence to make sure that we stamp this thing down, tamp it down, make sure it doesn't go and get even worse than it did the night before?
Right. As I said, the Tim Heaphy report outlines the mess that happened that day. And it was... There are so many factors that play into that, of mistrust of the intelligence that was right in their faces about the white supremacist activism. Sorry, lost my earphone. And instead, the local activists, particularly Black Lives Matter, were being investigated instead. And there were, to say the least, a lot of mistakes made.
Well, it's more than just mistakes. I mean, this is...
I know. Yeah.
The pattern
I agree.
Of white supremacist law enforcement. that is pervasive, and certainly in the South, was God, every local law enforcement organization in the South was infiltrated, if not controlled, by the Klan.
That's not okay. In Charlottesville at that time, there was a black man who was the police chief.
Yes.
So there
Yeah.
are other factors at
Yeah.
play in this particular
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. I agree with you. I'm just talking historically now.
Yeah, historically, completely
very,
a problem. Yes.
So
So-
when you're trying to make those changes, when you're trying to, you've got a black police chief, you've still got this deeply rooted culture of defending and protecting Jim Crow, white supremacy, and so there, the black police officers are put in a position where they're conflicted all the time with administering. Well, it just seems to me that somebody like Ken Williams would be in a very conflicted position in that situation. And the questions that you're asking, Ken, I think are exactly the ones that law enforcement officers should be asking. And the other thing is, correct me if I'm wrong, Susan, but the ACLU, came to the defense of the Klan when it was that it had a right to not at that moment, but they did defend they argued in favor of permitting their march.
Right, because the city had tried to cancel the permit. They were threatened with a lawsuit.
Right.
So their legal advice was they had to allow them to come. They tried moving them to a different spot, and that's when I believe the ACLU maybe also joined in and said, no, you can't do that either. I certainly understand the ACLU's position that you defend freedom of speech.
Let me
nothing
add this.
simple here.
Let me add this. It's okay to defend freedom of speech. I'll go full bore with defending freedom of speech, but freedom of speech has exceptions. Okay,
Yes.
if there are exceptions that if you're going to threaten, if you're going to commit acts of violence, if you're going to incite violence, and the thing that I'm having a problem with here is that law enforcement, and based on the community, the culture of this type of assembly, in past hindsight knowledge of what these things are like, how is it that administratively people can't say, you know what? Unfortunately, we appreciate your First Amendment rights for freedom of speech, but we have a past record of you inciting violence. So no, we're not going to permit you to have that permit unless you want to pay the $500,000 price that it's going to require for you to have security by our law enforcement officers. That would be one way to correct that.
I think
why are taxpayers paying for their protection if they're the people who are the agitators?
Right. I think a lot of those have been addressed in the past 2 years locally and are being addressed. I know that they have passed laws about open flames and things like that, or at least I've heard rumor of it. I don't actually live in Charlottesville. So some things I've kept track of, some things I've let go by because I don't have time to stop and analyze everything everybody's doing. If it applies to me or the work that we're doing with the Heather Heyer Foundation, I definitely give it priority over things happening that I can't participate in. I can't vote in Charlottesville. I can't do much more than express an opinion. So, yeah.
Tell us about the Heather Heyer Foundation and what you're doing moving forward, Susan.
Okay. So originally a GoFundMe was set up. We used part of that to set aside for some scholarship money. And then money was continuing to pour in after we closed that through the post office general delivery, through the funeral home, through the mayor's office, through TV stations, radio stations. So I went to Alfred Wilson, who was her friend and supervisor at Miller Law Group, and said, I'd like to do something responsible with this money. Can you help me? So we talked about it, and because I had been a school teacher, we thought, why not? Let's just expand this scholarship fund. So 9 days after Heather was killed, we filed our IRS paperwork. We had a board of directors put together quickly from people that Alfred knew and had contacts with, and started the foundation. Next thing I know, I'm on the VMA Awards announcing that less than 14 days after my daughter was killed. And it was kind of a blur. I remember walking the red carpet. I remember a lot of loud music, which I frankly enjoyed. I'm a rock and roller anyway. But, you know, at the same time, I needed to grieve my daughter, and I really didn't get to grieve my daughter for about 6 months. I was very angry and turned that anger into action, and started speaking when people would ask me to speak. And so our plan was to give 2 scholarships the first year, one to Heather's high school and one to the high school in Charlottesville. And in November of 2017, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation reached out to us out of California and wanted to know, would we join them for a campaign against hate? And we said, sure. It was an essay contest. They gave out 8,000 in scholarships. We gave out 1,000 with that. And the winners of that rode in the Rose Bowl parade with us, with AIDS Healthcare Foundation. Wow. So we're hanging out in Hollywood the night before the parade, and the kids said, you know what we'd really like is we'd like to have a group where we could do programs of our own, but not have the adults in charge take over. And we said, that's interesting. And so they talked about it and decided to call it Higher Voices. Now, that was 1.5 years ago. That's rolling out. We've had a couple of parent meetings already, and we're going to meet with the kids the first time next month. So that's pretty exciting. And then last summer, we gave out 3,000 in scholarships because we had Heather's high school, the local high school, Charlottesville, and then we had a miscellaneous category because we had a few unsolicited applications come in, and we said, why not? And this past year, we gave out 8,000 in scholarships. We gave out 6 to local high schools, 1 to a miscellaneous category. She actually lives in Massachusetts. And then 1 to a person who is in college as an adult. And they actually came up from Florida for the award ceremony. So we're very excited about that. We're excited about Higher Voices rolling out. We're working in conjunction with a group called The Sum that works on helping people change from the inside out. And so the kids will meet with college mentors who will also be trained. We're all getting background checks and trying to do this legally and responsibly. We'll meet online, and we'll meet once a month for the kids to develop the projects they're interested in. The adults will offer support, they'll offer coaching, but they will not take over. We absolutely advocate only positive, nonviolent social change. And we're just very excited about that. In 2020, we're hoping to start rolling out some difficult conversations. We are trying to do essay and scholarship application workshops in the local area, a scholarship fair with other high schools and other organizations in the area, because so often guidance is overwhelmed and the kids don't get to hear about all the different applications that they could be filling out. We hope to have a financial aid a FAFSA workshop for parents and especially for first generation college students, again, working with other organizations. Heather Heyer Foundation is literally me, who is on the road a lot, Alfred Wilson, who works a number of jobs, including working at Miller Law Group, and he's the executive director. And then Kathy Brinkley, my best friend, who gets to be there part-time a couple days a week to handle receipts. So over the summer, we hired Jamil Wilson, Alfred's son, to be our intern. And then we've hired Elliot Cisneros of the Sum to help run the voices, higher voices. So people say, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Well, it's just a handful of us trying to do everything. So that's kind of where we are. I've got 2 children's books off to the book agent now, along with my co-author Lola Shadadi from Raising a Baby Activist, and their children's picture books, and we'll see what they say about those. And then I'm working on Letters to Heather, all of my spare time.
If you have any spare time.
I don't.
I know you don't. So what parting words, or just words you want to leave with our listeners about Heather? Whatever you want to say, Susan.
You asked me about Heather, and the first thing I think of is her laugh. Her laugh is what I miss the most. Her laugh is what gets me through. Sometimes I have videos of her laughter. But what I wish to say to your audience is what we talked about briefly before, and that is, you may think that your actions are not big. You may think that your voice is not big. You may think that what you do is not important. But I'm here to tell you that you are in a unique situation. You are in a unique place in this world where you have a special set of talents and abilities that no one else has, that unique combination. So you have a calling as a human being on this earth to do something positive, nonviolent. Step up to the plate. Don't sit there and wring your hands and say, gee, I wonder what somebody can do to help me. But you be the one helping. You find some small way to make your voice heard and step up to the plate. But then don't just stand there full of good intentions, full of promise. Actually do something. We call that putting feet to your intentions or stepping out. So I say to you, as Americans, as human beings on this earth, step up and step out. And in that way, you can help my daughter's legacy continue to live on.
Thank you. Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure talking to you, and I hope I get to talk to you again.
Yes. Can she come back, David and Ken?
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
All right. Bye.
Ken, David.
Yeah.
Wow.
Real life experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful lady.
She is, isn't she? Her spirit just resonates. Like, I wanted to jump through and just get a hug. Like, I wanted a hug from her.
Yeah.
Like, give me some. I want some love.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I think, Ken, that you're definitely asking the right questions. I don't know enough of the details. I know there was a terrible failure of intelligence there, on the part of both the local and the state, law enforcement. There's something, Tamara, I think you mentioned something about this, that the governor at the time, Democratic Governor McAuliffe, made the National Guard available, and I guess
I was actually listening to talk radio, and he was on talking about his book, The Governor, at that time, and he mentioned the National Guard. So I wasn't sure, where that all came into play, or I didn't know. So that's why I asked her. So I guess in his book he did make the reference on the radio, because I heard that.
Yeah,
I think we also need to hold the federal agencies accountable. The FBI field office is right there in Charlottesville.
That's right.
And we have to also bring this back full circle, which at the time, the FBI was talking about Black identity extremists,
right,
and not talking about white white identity extremism,
Yeah.
which is something that nationally we have seen as an explosive topic, with white supremacists running around this country armed to the hilt with assault rifles, looking to take out people who are peaceful protesters, people who are, just day shopping for school clothes and things like that. These folks are terrorists, and law enforcement has to do a way better job of making sure that it polices these terrorists. You know,
absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. At the same time I think that we can't. People know there are white people who know these white terrorists.
Sure.
And they need to be the ones who are the eyes and ears, and to not see this, not to excuse this kind of rhetoric, because another quote from Toni Morrison is oppressive language is violence, so
fighting words.
Yeah. And your point about, you're absolutely right on about the thing about the way that the Republican Party has been doing this, Ken. They're the ones who protested that 10-year-old investigation that the intelligence community did, which highlighted so-called white extremist violence, and they got that report suppressed.
Yep.
So with the collusion of the Democrats, the Democrats did not fight that heavily at all. So we're really at a point where does this change? Is there really a qualitative change in direction? I don't know. It's going to take a lot of pushing and a lot of pressure to.
There are two extremes in law enforcement. There's reactive and there's proactive. Mm-hmm. And right now, with white extremists, law enforcement is reactive instead of being proactive. And that right there in itself makes no sense to me. If you have social media where, according to the facts with the government, these people were using social media to communicate with other people who were like-minded, who wanted to go out and incite riots and commit acts of violence and stuff like that. It's very easy from a law enforcement investigative mind to put the pieces together to understand that, if people are on social media talking about they're going out to plan to do acts of violence, that means that you're there to intercept them, maybe surveil them if you want, and then intercept them immediately before they commit murder. And that's the part that I'm thinking is really absent here. Unfortunately, in America, we have focused on everyone else that looks brown and black as being, the potential evil person. And we have not focused on the fact that there are many people who look white that are committing acts of evil, violence, and they need to be adjudicated just like all the black and brown folks that are committing those acts. Don't treat them differently, treat them the same.
Okay. I guess I can't hear anybody, but so I guess
can you hear us, Egberto? Because
yes,
we can sure hear you.
Okay,
where are you, Egberto? Are you in the jungle?
Oh, wait a minute. Am I noisy or something, or what?
We can hear wherever you are, but we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, as it turns out, this program was so informational today, and having Susan Hayer on was just amazing. I mean, I don't even want to come in with any other subject other than what she was talking about, because I don't think I would be doing justice to the narrative that you had on air today. That was just wonderful, and I think it is something that America has to hear, and we need to see more of the Susan Hayers of the world out there, because coming from her has extra, what is the word that I want to use? Coming from her, a woman who lost her daughter, it is so important. So Tamara, you did a great job in bringing her on board.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to have her. It was.
Yes.
I was just excited when she said yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, we don't. National issues. The national issue is the national issue of the day is we as independent progressive media bring in real people out that can give that sort of message and make sure that the messaging that's not getting the rightly due throughout this country gets its due. Tamara Johnson, Shealey, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Egberto. You can find Egberto Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. This man is everywhere. Politics Done Right with Egberto.com. Thank you, Egberto. EgbertoWilliams.com. Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care, David. Take care, Ken.
Yeah. Thank you, Egberto. Too much noise there. I don't know.
I know that you and your ears, David. I know you're sensitive to that noise.
Well, David, I wanted to say that you're spot on today too, and I appreciate your being able to, facilitate these type of conversations across, different platforms, because it's important for us to reach many different people instead of being stuck in our own little circles, reaching out and bridging the gaps and stuff like that, between, ages, color, religious beliefs, you name it. We have to go and make it so that we flatten all of these different systems that keep us apart and have us all talking on the same level. I appreciate that.
And that's just what America is. I'm just, I, as bad as times are and these crazy things that are happening, I do believe we are coming together. I mean, I know it doesn't look that way sometimes, but I do believe we are.
We are, but they're just two different teams, though. That's the problem.
I know. Maybe, hopefully our team is going to win. Like, we just keep fighting. That's all we can do is keep fighting, right, Ken?
Good versus evil, Those are the two teams.
Yeah.
And they're maintaining the moral ascendancy of that. I think Susan Bro really exemplifies. It's it's understanding, and also the that she brings, and also the idea that we all have a calling where our actions are not unimportant. They are, they have consequences, and so that's a really important point to keep in mind when we're, particularly for European Americans, in the face of this kind of we have to say that this doesn't represent us, and that we have a different way, that our values are values of solidarity, and not finding strength by attacking defenseless people. And
let me just add one thing. Susan Bro is championing the fact that for every action is a reaction, and she's showing that the reaction to her daughter's death, Heather Heyer, is that she didn't sink into the ground. She's showing how she's elevating and rising towards the sky with other programs and activities to highlight her daughter's name and what she stood for, but at the same time to promote other people uplifting themselves through scholarship and things like that, which is just an unbelievable story.
So I want to thank you, Ken, for joining us every second Friday right here on the Tamara for Georgia broadcast. You can find Mr. Ken Williams at kwillservices.com. That's kwillservices.com. Mr. David Slavin, you can always find him right here on Facebook at Acknowledge the Divide, right here on Facebook. And I am Tamara Johnson Shealey. Every Friday we are here. David, are we going to be here next Friday?
No, I guess not.
I have a residency on campus next Friday, so we might not be here next Friday, but let's just see how we work this out. We may have a guest, somebody sit in for us and just take over the broadcast, just have their way with this broadcast. So find us for every Friday right here on Facebook. Thank you, Miss Susan Bro, for all you're doing. God bless you. May he continue to strengthen you in your journey and as you lift your daughter up Thank you for all you're doing, Susan.
Amen.
Amen. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.